Hello all. I think we'll just wait a couple of minutes until we get started. Jane, are you able to share slides, share your screen?
I am. Have you got, Steve, have you got permission to create breakout rooms yet?
I don't.
Do you know, do we know who is the tech person who is in this room?
Hi, Jane. I'm the tech.
Steve, have you got permission to create breakout rooms yet?
I don't.
Do we know who is the tech person who is in this room?
Hi, Jane. I'm your tech assistant for this room. My name is Melissa. I'm the tech.
Steve, have you got permission to
Okay, I think we seem to get some sort of loop of recordings there, but I do have breakout room permissions now, Jane.
Super. Anybody who's just joined, if you'd like to join us in the presentation as well, it's a Google Slides, and we'll be doing lots of we're going to be doing lots of interactive activities. So we need you actually in the slide deck. So I've put the link in the chat window. And I'll also share it, but we'd like you to log on if possible. Can you see my screen, Steve?
Yes. Do you want to go to the very first slide?
Is that good?
That's good. So I'm just thinking, I don't know whether it might take a few minutes for other people to join the sessions and to join the session. And if they do, they won't see the link to the Google slide deck as they come in. So it might be worth just pasting the link in a couple more times if participant numbers go up.
Okay.
Okay, so we should probably get started then. Welcome all. I just wanted to start before Di and Jane kick off with their session. I wanted to welcome you all to the LCT UK leg of this marathon tour around the world, Explorations of LCT Global. The LCT community itself actually stretches back almost a decade, back to around 2011-12. We had a fledgling UK community, small group of about 5 or 6 of us got together. We were all doing our PhDs at the time. Richard Pountney, who is here, Gina Roche was here earlier, and a few of us. And then sort of as we finished our projects, the group sort of dissolved a little bit and then was more formally reconstituted in around 2019 with all of the other regional groups. So we've had a couple of face-to-face meetings. Sheffield was one in about 2019, 6 or 7 of us getting together. But then, of course, the pandemic hit. And so for the last couple of years, we've been online. So we're a community in principle of about 20 or 30 of us. In practice, of course, people are busy and we can't always get together at the same time. So usually somewhere between about 7, 8 and 14 or 15 of us have been getting together on roughly a monthly basis to share practice, play with translation devices. We've had some guest speakers from other groups. So it's a relatively active community, and actually one of the positives of us moving online during the pandemic has been that ability to connect more easily with each other. So there are 7 or 8 of us involved this afternoon. It's sessions 7 to 10, so 2 to 6 p.m. UK time. Each of the sessions is going to be interactive in its own way. There's going to be different things to do during the session. And in order to be inclusive, in order to sort of make time for all of us to be part of it, those who wanted to be part of things today, they're all paired sessions. So each of the 4 next sessions are 2 people working together. And we're crossing the LCT dimension. So we're starting next with semantics. We then move on to autonomy at 3 p.m. We've got specialization at 4 p.m. and then at 5 p.m. a little bit of fun, looking at sports images, and that's going to be kind of crossing 2 dimensions, autonomy and specialization. So if you want to get in touch, if you want to be part of LCT UK, message me, get in touch, email. You're very welcome to join us. We have a Teams hub, lots going on there, and you're welcome to join us at presentations and discussions. I will shut up now and pass you over to Jane and Di for the first of our sessions this afternoon in LCT UK.
So hello everybody, thank you for joining us for our session. If please do join us in the Google Slides. I've put the link to the Google Slides in the chat window. If anyone cannot access the slides, then please let us know by sending a message to us in the chat, and we'll kind of help you. But if you can join us on slide number 2, as Steve said, these are the sessions that are this afternoon, but we are on slide 3, so you can see that it's myself, Jane Waite, and Di Swift. Di, are you there?
I am there, Jane.
Di and I, we have a very conversational style of presentation, and we do hope that you enjoy it. So Di, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks very much, Jane. So my name is Diane Swift. I'm Director of Keeler North Staffordshire Teacher Education, which is a school-based teacher training organisation in the West Midlands of England. We train about 100 teachers a year across a partnership of about 120 schools. And just because I'm not busy enough, I'm also in the final stages of doing my educational doctorate. And I'm looking forward to sharing some of that work with you later on. So Jane, over to you.
All right, so I'm Jane Waite. I'm a research scientist, and I actually work at the Raspberry Pi Computing Education Research Centre, which is a lot of words put together. We are part of the Raspberry Pi Foundation and the University of Cambridge School of Computer Science and Technology. So we're a kind of a joint venture. And I'm also, like Di, a little bit bonkers, and I'm doing that at the same time as being a doctoral candidate, and that's at Queen Mary University of London. And I'm actually a computer scientist, but and also an educationist, so I cross over in that way. And today I'm very excited to say that we're introducing you not only to our research areas, but also to the joy of Google Slides. And if you'd like to join us in slide 4, and when you're using Google Slides, if you use it in the same way that I am, so it's not as a slideshow, but it's in the way it's the way that you would develop the slides, so it's in the developer kind of mode, then you'll see this is our lovely lesson plan effectively, or set of activities for the day, and you can see these are all the times that we're planning to do things, and already we're late. But that's normal, isn't it, when you're a teacher? But you can see that anything that's a colour, a yellow or a pink or a blue, it means that you're doing things. So if you're a lurker, be warned, because we'll be asking you to do things. And if you go to slide 5, so I should see all the little creatures. So we've got lots of really cute things. We've got alligators and chameleons. If all of the creatures can come and join me in slide 5, as we go along, if any questions pop into your head, you think, oh, I must ask Di or Jane this question, please can you pop the questions in there? So we'll use the Google Slides rather than the chat for questions. And now I want you to do your first activity. So if you'd like to join me in slide 6, so I can see that I've got, at the moment, I've got a chameleon and a narwhal who are just languishing on slide 1, but I need you on slide 6. So come on, creatures, come to slide 6. So on slide 6, I'm going to ask you how confident you are in terms of your knowledge about these things. And the way that you're going to interact is by going over and getting hold of one of these little sticky notes. So if you kind of move across, you can see there's a whole pile of stickers. And if your surname is between A and H, then you use slide number 6. If your surname is between I and O, then you use slide number 7. And if your surname is between P and Z, then you use slide number 8. And you just slide across your sticker to say, Amber, I'm not sure about semantic profiles. I've heard of them, but I'm not really confident. Or you might think, I have no idea what Jane's talking about, in which case you slide over a little red dot. So can you rag red, amber, green, very coarse or a very kind of simple way of doing a quick assessment in terms of your knowledge of the 3 kind of learning objectives that we've got for the session. I'm just going to slide it back. So if you just want to rag red, amber, green, your confidence. And I really do like this as an approach, because I can straight away, as I'm looking on the slide sorter, which is on the left-hand side of the Google Slides display, I can see that we've got actually the people with a surname at the latter end of the alphabet seem to be more confident than the people in the middle, because there's lots of greens for that group, but we have got some reds. So Diane, that means that we've got some people who don't know things, so we can actually make some improvement, but we have got a lot of very knowledgeable people as well. But the area that seems to be where we can make most kind of change seems to be about this last objective, which is to make connections between your own area of study and that of others with the relationship to gravity. So that's really brilliant. Once you've finished that, we're really going to go LCT. And if you'd like to join me on slide 9. So I can see if people have finished. So all of you need to zoom to slide 9. I've still got a languishing chameleon and a goose on slide 1, but they maybe have gone to make a cup of tea. But if you join us on slide 9, we're going to use breakout rooms. And luckily, I have got an amazing assistant with Steve Kirk, who is going to create some breakout rooms, but not yet, Steve, because I need to explain the activity. What we're going to do is we're going to ask you to unpack your knowledge of our topic area. So, and the topic area is semantic gravity. So if you'd like to go to slide 11, you see, I told you you're going to be busy. Slide 11. So everyone come to slide 11. I wonder if that goose is still on. Yes, look, the goose is still there on 1. I don't think we're ever going to get the goose back. On slide 11, this is your activity, and what you're going to do is you're going to slide in one of these sticky notes and you're going to type in what you already know about semantic gravity. Okay, so you're going to do that. So slide those in. Now, we haven't actually got as many people as we expected. We've got 29 of you. So let's see, Steve, with 29, shall we just have, how many groups should we have?
We could do 4 or 5 groups of 4 or 5, if that's better, something like that.
Let's should we do 5 groups?
Okay.
5 4 is 20, aren't they? That's about right. So that sounds about good. Yeah, Diane's giving me the thumbs up. So we're going to have 5 groups, and then Steve is now going to assign you to a breakout room, and then you need to do your stickers. You need to do your breakout rooms. I don't know if I've explained this very well. If you're in breakout group number 1, then you would write on page 11. If you are breakout group number 2, then you would do it on page 12. If you are breakout group 3, because Steve's doing that, then you would write on 13. And if you've already done your sticker, then you can just move it to the right page. Okay, so do your stickers and then talk about your knowledge of semantic gravity in your breakout groups. And we want you to finish, and not at 1/4 past, because that would give you, we'll be going back in time at 20 minutes past the hour. So you've got a little discussion until 20 minutes past the hour about what you already know about semantic gravity. Steve, open the rooms.
Okay, people should be getting notifications now. So just click on the join request.
And if you're Di and I are just going to stay here so that we can have a discussion about it as well. Someone's got a very pretty colour text there on breakout 5.
Okay, so we do actually have so six people still in the room. Maybe they could stay here.
Yeah, that sounds like a good idea, because we can have a discussion, and there might be potentially some lurkers. I wonder if the goose is here. Right, so hello to who is in the room. So we've got Lee, Melissa. So Melissa's a helper, is helping out on things. Eunice, and you, Steve. It might be just me and you. What do you know about semantic density, Steve?
What do I know about semantic density?
Yeah. Oh no, it's not density. It's gravity. Semantic gravity.
Well, I know that it's about the context dependence of meaning. And that it's been used in lots of different studies across LCT. We have, what am I doing? You're wanting me to define it or talk about how it's been used? Or?
Yeah, because I'm less knowledgeable about gravity, so teach me about gravity.
Okay, so we have different. So semantic gravity is about context dependence of meaning, and we have different strengths. So stronger semantic gravity is about meanings that are more connected to their contexts. So that might be everyday conversations. That might be the simple drawings of children, pictures of their everyday lives, those kinds of things. And then we have weaker semantic gravity, where meaning making is more abstracted from a contextual base. So that might be theory in research practices. That might be more abstract art, perhaps the paintings of Dali or somebody like that, where things begin to look less like reality and sort of a bit more abstract.
Do you think that different people have their own personal, do you think there are different views of what is abstract and what isn't abstract? So that, because I always feel that when I'm in a computer science lesson that everything's abstract, but other people go, oh no, this is very much applied. But do you think there are different people with different views of what is concrete or what is abstract and what is everyday?
Well, yes, of course. I think people interpret those ideas differently, but from the perspective of semantic gravity is not necessarily about concrete and abstract. In some contexts of research and practice, it may translate that way, but in other contexts, it doesn't necessarily. So, for example, working with, so Saul Richardson's work at Sydney early in his PhD, he was looking at improvisational jazz. And one of the first translation devices that he came up with was stronger semantic gravity is when musicians play exactly the notes on the page, and then weaker semantic gravity as they begin to move away from those exact notes and they begin to improvise. So that to an untrained ear, once you get to the weakest levels of semantic gravity, your musicians, your improvisational jazz musicians, are playing things that almost no longer resemble the music on the page. And he coded that as very weak semantic gravity. So I think it's true that quite often in simplistic terms, we can see stronger and weaker semantic gravity as relating to concrete and abstract, but there are lots of people doing really interesting projects that show that that's not necessarily the case. So the LCT concepts sit at that quite high level of abstraction, and then for different research studies, for different contexts of practice, they might get enacted in slightly different ways.
So that's more like about personalization almost. So going from something that's like the standard norm to this now is my own personal view of it.
In a sense, yes, but I guess quote abstracted away from the page, from the concrete reality of what the music writer intended, I suppose.
Cool. So Steve, I think we need to close the breakout rooms. Can you do that?
I can. So people will get a 1 minute warning. So it'll take a few seconds for people to wrap up and bring themselves back. Yeah, but hopefully we should.
I can see that Diane, she got her group very well organised, and they're all back here. So thank you, room 3.
That's all right. Do we get a gold star, Jane?
You do, actually. Do you know what? I'm going to give you a gold star now.
Thank you.
Because I can actually do that.
Thank you. So it was lovely to meet everyone in our room, and we were able to have a little bit of a conversation about our different experiences and a different range of experiences using semantic gravity. But as a group, so we wrote on different pages, but we're very pleased for our star. Thank you, Jane.
There you go. So I'm always happy to, I was at school, because I was a teacher, I was called Sticker Easy, because I like giving kids stickers. So there you go. So we're just waiting for a few more people to come back. And I think, Diane, we are a little bit behind time. So rather than doing like a feedback from the groups, if we're going to your section next.
Yeah, lovely. That's
all
fine.
Right.
Jane,
so,
thank you.
Thank you for everybody for, first of all, thank you for taking part, everybody who's now back in the main room. I hope that you enjoyed using stickers and post-it notes and things. And Diane is now going to do a little bit of Karen said, we're too short in the breakout room. She's very sad, but don't worry, Karen, we'll be sending you back. So we'll give you a little bit of extra time in the next one. So we're going to now have, Diane is going to present on her research. So if you'd all like to join us in slide 16. So if I can see all of the creatures, I'm going to go and see if the goose, oh no, the goose is with us. Slide 16. If you're doing this with students, you find, once you do the first activity, all of the ones who are languishing, they arrive. So if everyone can come to slide 16, and then if you'd like to take it away, Diane.
Yeah, thanks, Jane. So this presentation came about in part because Steve, who coordinates LCT UK, supported by Natalie, made a connection for us between the interest that Jane and I have. And I know many of you are familiar with the fact that LCT gives us this language to share research that comes from different contexts. So I began talking to Jane about my doctoral work, my doctoral study. So as I introduced myself at the beginning, I run a SCIT, a school-centred initial teacher training programme, as well as researching into teacher education. So our title here, Teacher Education in England or Teacher Training. I know that Carl talked earlier about the big dichotomies, and LCT being a way to interrupt and unsettle some of those big dichotomies. So a dichotomy for us in the English context in relation to teacher education is it teacher education or is it teacher training, and what do we mean by those different terms? And one of the reasons for that dichotomy, or one of the reasons for the concern, is because of the political interference in our system. So the first quote on the screen here comes from Michael Gove, who in 2010 was the Secretary of State for Education. And in 2010, Michael Gove introduced a white paper called The Importance of Teaching. And that white paper, when he was introducing it, he described teaching as a craft, and as a craft best learned as an apprentice observing a master craftsman or craftswoman. So lots of assumptions within that statement: an assumption that teaching is a craft, and an assumption that a craft is only an apprenticeship model where you learn through the pedagogies of observation and modelling. So Gove, in his official role as a government minister, had that particular perspective. That white paper led to a big sea change in education in our country, particularly teacher education. It moved it to being predominantly school-based. And a lot of people felt that with school-based training, it became too practice-focused, too orientated on the actions, the performances, the observable actions that you could see in a classroom. And folk felt this mattered. So the work of Furlong and Whitty and others, they felt that was really significant, because actually the way we train teachers is a proxy really for the way that we work as a nation, in the way that we understand education. So if we're satisfied with Michael Gove's description that teaching is a craft, that it's learned through observation, that the focus is on the technicalities, the techniques, the performed learned actions, if we're satisfied with that, is that actually a proxy for how everybody learns, how children learn in the classroom? Is it okay to model and to learn through modeling, to learn through that observation? Is that sufficient? So there was a lot of concern that actually that wasn't sufficient, that actually that was an insufficient view of learning how to teach, and in fact of learning, that it was insufficient just to learn through observation. And that's not to denigrate craft or craft knowledge. Craft knowledge is a particularly special type of knowledge. And so in my research, I've drawn on the work of Gamble and others to really think carefully about craft knowledge. And Gamble's got a different view to Michael Gove about craft knowledge. And Gamble's work shows that within a craft, we relate our procedures, our techniques, our performances to a principle. So unless we understand the principle, unless we understand the driver, the conceptual knowledge, the collective knowledge, the reservoir of professional knowledge that drives that action, unless we also pay attention or notice the principle, then that Govian articulation of craft is insufficient. We're missing, in Carl's words, we're missing the rules of the game if we just focus on the observation and the practice. So Jane, if we can move to the next slide. The next slide shares how the government conception of teaching as performed techniques has been articulated in an assessment tool. So this slide just shares a little clip, a little extract from our teacher standards. Our teacher standards, there are 8 standards together in part 1 and then part 2, and we've just got a small extract here. And these standards articulate, make explicit what a teacher in training is expected to do. So these are the standards that underpin what for us is called QTS, qualified teacher status. So to be recognised with QTS at the end of a period of teacher training, you need to have achieved all these standards. You need to have evidenced all these standards. So if I can draw your attention just to Teacher Standard 6 about making accurate and productive use of assessment, as we look at the screen, the first one on the right-hand column. And if I can take you to the 3rd bullet point there. So making accurate and productive use of assessment. And one of the things a teacher needs to do, a teacher needs to use data to monitor progress so that they can set targets for subsequent lessons. So a beginning teacher needs to evidence that. And in the English context, our beginning teachers are supported by mentors, supported by teacher educators, and the teacher educators and the beginning teacher, they engage in weekly dialogues, weekly discussions. So my research focused on those weekly discussions, and I wanted to see what happened in those discussions and how knowledge was structured, how knowledge was scaffolded in those sessions. So was knowledge scaffolded as Michael Gove suggested? Was knowledge scaffolded so it was very context dependent? So using the concept of semantic gravity, was it tied to its context? Was it localized? Was it held down? Was it restricted by that context in terms of time and space? Or did the teacher educator and beginning teacher, were they able to access some of those bigger professional concepts rather that go across time and space, that are some of the principles that inform actions, but they're not always visible when we observe actions. So what I wanted to explore was were actually those principles themselves visible in the dialogue. So to do that, I used semantic gravity, and on the next slide, we've got an example of the translation device that I used. So SG++ at the bottom, heavily tied to context, would be where in the dialogue, where in the discussion, the beginning teacher and teacher educator simply described, they talked about what happened in the context. SG+ was if maybe they referenced a bigger knowledge, they referenced a knowledge that had the capability to go a little bit beyond the individual classroom. An SG minus would be where they were able to reference some context independent concepts. So assessment would be an example of a context independent concept that crosses many school sites, many classroom sites, and enables us to access the reservoir of professional knowledge. An SG minus minus would be where we're able to articulate that concept and able to make stronger connections in relation to what it is to be a public professional who teaches and that knowledge. So the way that I did this was a little bit unusual. So that was my translation device, and I put my translation device to work diffractively. And on the next slide is an articulation of what diffraction means. So diffraction comes from Karen Barrad's work. Karen Barrad, who's a post-humanist, and Karen Barrad talks about diffraction enables us to plot where differences occur so that we can think about the effects of those differences. And what I was interested in was the extent to which a teacher educator's understanding of the profession might restrict or enable a beginning teacher. So was the teacher educator restricted by Gove's craft model of teaching, or did the teacher educator have a different conception of what it is to learn to be a teacher? And what I was also conscious of was that a beginning teacher doesn't come as a blank canvas. The beginning teacher will have experienced sessions beyond the classroom. The beginning teacher will have read, will have engaged with text, will have spoken to others. So the beginning teacher also brings their knowledge to the discussion, to the dialogue. So when I analysed the dialogues, I didn't plot them as a single semantic profile. So perhaps if we go to the next slide, you'll be able to see a little bit what I did. So this is in the same time frame, the way that I've plotted how the beginning teacher structured their knowledge and how the teacher educator structured their knowledge, and how do they interact, how do they inform and influence each other. And this is an example of where maybe they didn't perhaps inform or interact each other as productively as they might have done. So the dotted line is the beginning teacher, the solid line is the teacher educator, the mentor. And the beginning teacher is talking about how they've used assessment for booster groups, so putting children into groups for interventions. They then say that's to enable them to make progress, so they're using a more context-independent concept, that notion of progress. Bring it back a little bit down to the classroom, they're waving iteratively, so they're making connections. They make a connection with a marking policy, but beyond just the school's marking policy, thinking about the way that marking policies can be put to work to help them understand assessment. While they're waving, the teacher educator isn't interfering at all. The teacher educator was listening. And then at the end of that little sequence, the teacher educator says, oh yeah, but you're talking about intervention, assessment and progress, suddenly throwing three big concepts at the beginning teacher. And you can see at that point, the beginning teacher goes back to the context. They've had fuses blown, can't quite connect with all that going on. So they go back to, so what do you want me to do next week? And what I found in the research is actually where the waves follow each other, that tends to lead to a more productive dialogue that enables connections to be made between those more context independent concepts and what was observed in the classroom. So I'm just sharing here, this was the first stage of my research. What I then did was take these profiles back and share them with the beginning teacher and teacher educators. And actually by sharing the profiles, the rules of the game became explicit. The beginning teacher and teacher educator became far more aware of the big concepts and how they could put those big concepts to work more productively within their practice. And that notion of within within the practice. So not seeing theory and practice as separate, but seeing theory and practice as a relationship that could be found within the classroom and within the dialogue, and that the dialogue and the classroom practice actually interacted far more productively. But Jane, I just thought I'd share this first step and first stage in my research today, and just see how that connects with yourself and with other work that others may have been engaged with. So I'll pause now, Jane, and just see how you found yourself responding to what I've said.
So what's really interesting for me is Di introduced me to her research, like as a precursor to us doing the presentation, and I was just so excited because suddenly somebody was talking a language that I kind of understood. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to first of all give you a really quick introduction to what my research area is, and then I'm going to react in a sense to what Di said. So if you'd like to join me on slide 23, I've got a very quick summary of my research, and it is very fast. So I was not dealing with trainee teachers, I was dealing with industry professionals who teach and support their colleagues to program. So it's, I used to be a developer as well before I was a teacher, and so it's people who sit next to each other and teach each other to program. And they were also people who might volunteer in schools to teach programming, but these were IT professionals. And what we did was we introduced them to pedagogies to teach programming from school and university research. So they were a little bit like trainee teachers then, because suddenly they're learning about pedagogies and about how to teach programming, which really freaked them out. But within that, we taught them about semantic waves, but also through semantic waves. So just as you had the learning intention and then you unpacked, and then you're kind of going to do an activity, and then we repack. So we did that over and over again all the time. Whenever we were introducing blooms or learning object, or whatever it was we were introducing, we semantic waved it. We just waved and waved and waved. So they kind of just got this experience of waving. And every context that we used was from their own workplace. So before we'd kind of engage with them, we said, well, what kind of things do you teach, or do you train other people in? So it was very context specific to their situation. We taught 106 IT professionals over four cohorts, and each cohort had 4 sessions, 60 to 90 minutes. We had a post-course survey where only 30 completed it, but then the most important thing was 6 months after the course, we then interviewed 6 participants, and we used communities of practice and a knowledge appropriation model to kind of really start to unpick what was happening. But we didn't use semantic waves to review what they'd done, even though we taught it. Which now, having seen everything that Di said, I'm thinking, oh, I missed a trick there. But the big findings for us were that the teachers predicted that semantic waves would be the most useful thing that they learnt, and they actually used it. And they also thought that contexts were probably quite useful, and they used it. And if I just take you to slide number 24, and I've just got like a little diagram to show you some of this. You won't understand some of the words because it's to do with teaching programming. But on slide 24, the things that they thought were going to be really useful were semantic waves. And we categorize those as general education pedagogy. But we think semantic waves is really useful for teaching programming, because programming is kind of got absolutely packed full of really complex concepts and very context specific activities. But they also thought all these other things that we showed them would also be really useful, but they didn't use any of them. All they used was semantic waves. So it's this grey colour is what they actually used. So they actually used 6 months later semantic waves, context specific scenarios, and by George, all the things we'd not really thought we taught them. So where we used learning objectives and ragging and assessment and lesson structure, because we'd exemplified it, but we didn't say, oh, we're teaching you this. We just did it because that's what we're used to doing. That's what they took away from it. So that's kind of our findings were that they love semantic waves, and actually what they took away from it was their experience was what they reapplied. So I'm now going to take you to slide 21, and all I'm doing here is exemplifying what I'd like you to do now, and that is I was making notes whilst Di was talking, and I was thinking to myself, well, what Di has done, how does that relate to my experience of my research? And first of all, my thing is that my participants, my participants, they were not teachers. They saw themselves as trainers, really, when they walked through the door. And in fact, there's a quote on slide 25, which I'll show you in a minute, which kind of really exemplifies this. And they saw what they did as being Gove's view of the world. They were trainers. You know, it was about apprenticeship, and it was all about the tech. And they didn't need to know about all this soft namby-pamby kind of education stuff. And then from everything that I know that that's a naive view. They were definitely missing the rules of the game. But goodness me, we really exposed the rules of the game. I shared their learning plans, and I said, now we're going to do this really weird thing called unpacking, and they did it, and they went, oh, that's cool. Now, Di talked about there being standards that kind of constrain teachers. There are no standards for these IT professionals. They can do whatever they like, but should there be? Maybe there should. But anyway, in terms of scaffolding, the knowledge scaffolding from my research was through, I delivered this material kind of thing, and then I found out what they did by interviewing them all that time later. But what was really interesting for me as well was that they were not a blank slate. Just as Di said, they'd all come with their own views, and actually I had the ones who agreed to be interviewed they were already part of a community of practice. So one of the groups that we trained was a very, very hugely important, big, massive bank. And they had this community of practice who were interested, a small group of self-selected individuals who were really interested in education. And so they kind of were already on the road. But what, again, was interesting for me is that when we talked about the context, so Di's view of this, how important the context was, kind of a little bit by accident. We just did everything in a context dependent and a context specific way, and that's exactly what they kind of experienced, and that's what they kind of replicated. And maybe as trainee teachers, they're just on the because that's in the end they decided they were teachers, so they kind of went through this thing of, well, there were trainers before, but now we're kind of teachers because we've got this bag of tricks. So if you just like to join me on slide 25, I just want you to read what's on slide 25. And you can notice that this person, he talks about training, and then suddenly, but not necessarily teaching them. And I think that was the key thing for me, was that suddenly they kind of moved from being trainers. Now they knew the rules of the game. And I'll just find you another quote, which is kind of quite hilarious, which I'll just move up, because it's really interesting how every time I listen to Di, something new kind of pops up. So if you look on slide 26 and see what someone said here was, I really did reveal the rules of the game. So participant E said, oh, the fact that you just kind of came in and you just did it and then said, okay, now you go away and do it. I was like, oh, I guess this is not difficult. I think I'll just do it. And I think it was largely that had the biggest impact, I think. So kind of revealing the rules of the game. So I now want to stop, and we want to give you the last 15 minutes to go and talk in your groups about Di's amazing research and how it might be kind of interesting to understand and reflect on. So Steve, my breakout room person, can you open the breakout rooms? And if you'd like to go into your breakout rooms, and again, you've got a slide, and you can put some post-it notes in there, maybe like I did, to kind of share your ideas. So Steve, can you do the breakout rooms?
Yeah, just give me 1 second.
I don't know if they'll be allocated to the same breakout groups.
No, I'm kind of randomizing things again.
Jane, what time do you want us back?
If you come back at 55. No, in fact, make it 56. 56. Oh, 57. Let's do 57. We give you as much time as possible.
About 10 minutes.
Yeah, 57. Go.
Okay, here we go.
So Steve, it's probably me and you left again.
Yes, I'm forgetting to stop people from joining. It's fine. We'll see if there are a few.
Well, we can continue to discuss. So Steve, from your point of view, what do you find interesting about Di's research?
I suppose it resonates very much with things that I am interested in. So I mean, I work in English for academic purposes, and some of my role over the past decade or so, as actually I'll be talking about briefly later, is working with teachers at induction in CPD sessions, observing them and so on. And there's a similar dichotomy and debate in English for academic purposes as there is in Di's context around those practice theory connections and sort of a bit of a binary mindset in the sector, with some people feeling that they are only quote teachers, that they just need to sort of be in the classroom with their students, sort of the business of just teaching and getting things done, and some people are perhaps less interested in connecting out to bigger ideas, wanting to talk about theory, practice, connecting their sort of the training aspects of the classroom with those wider conversations about assessment, about academic discourse, about social context, about the positionality of students or the positionality of practitioners or whatever. And so the work where a teacher educator, for example, might mediate a discussion during or after a teacher observation or during a professional conversation to sort of scaffold a conversation that lifts the teacher in and out of wider conversations. That's something that resonates. It's something that I've done with practitioners myself.
Yeah, I think for me, and if I compare that again to what you've just said to my research, is the IT professionals had no language to talk to each other about things. They had never heard this idea of learning objectives before, and it was like a revelation. And suddenly in the survey, in the interview, one of them said, well, we were talking about learning objectives and assessment, and and they said, and certainly they were just given these concepts which, without knowing those, they really had no clue what was going on. So it's interesting that in schools or in universities or wherever, as professional teachers, that's not valued, and yet it was like shining a light on something that was a black art for these IT professionals.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and some of that stuff is accessible. It's entirely accessible, but I think, as you articulated earlier, just sort of not having that language, people not thinking of themselves as teachers, particularly not having a way to talk about practice, not having a language to talk about how you move through an activity, how you sequence activities, how those things might make a difference for the kind of learning that results. Those are things that even more developed teachers, I think, don't necessarily have a full language for. So I think what you did and what Di is doing is clearly very, very powerful in your own professional contexts.
And for me, what was so important was the community of practice, because this particular group who'd then really taken it, taken the opportunity and run with it, they had each other to talk to about it. And because they'd trained together, so they all kind of, what we did when they came into the room, we'd kind of put them on tables for the same, within the same department, knowing that they then, if they were training other people, they could talk to each other about it. So this and I do wonder with teacher training, because we take them away from their school environment and they're not with the people who, or are they? Maybe they are with their teachers, but maybe the teachers that they're learning from are not using the same vocabulary. Is that, how does I don't know, how do community of practice really pan out for trainee teachers? Does it work? Because are they within a community of practice in their new school, or are they outsiders?
I don't know. I mean, it's not a world that I know particularly. But of course, the beauty of LCT and the beauty of this is precisely that it does give that shared language, right? I mean, Carl Mayton talks a lot about the way that education is segmented, and each of the subfields and each community develops their own language, their own sort of pet theories, their own ways of talking about things. And often these concepts and ideas and ways of practicing overlap and sometimes refer to the same things, but we're all using different terminology. And so it's hard to speak to each other. And the beauty of the LCT concepts, of course, when they're enacted in this way for professional practice, is that it gives people a lens, those aha moments. Yeah. But as you say, then it really gets people talking together, share a shared language that is not just a theoretical language, but something that helps people see how they might practice differently and plan differently, and perhaps even speak with their students differently or with their colleagues differently. And your examples here are lovely instances of that.
Yeah, because that was the other thing, was that some of the people that they were then teaching programming to had been on the education course as well. So they were going, oh, so are we going down the bottom of the wave now? So it gave both the student and the teachers that same kind of context. And I think that's kind of really exciting. And I don't know how we replicate that in education. I don't know how.
No, it's true.
That it felt like something really special that we kind of accidentally happened across, because our goal was actually to teach them about prim and unplugged and tracing and quite technical things, but they didn't. That's not what they picked up. They picked up the rules of the game, actually.
Yeah, which is powerful, because then it's generative and they can use it in other contexts and so on. Okay, so we're at 55. So I've just triggered the 1 minute warning, so people have some notice to get back here for 56. You said, didn't you? So
56, 57. They'll only complain anyway.
Well, I know that we're not supposed to run over, are we? Because the YouTube clips get clipped and so on. So
okay, yeah, do it, and then we just need to drive them to slide 37.
Looks like people are enjoying their conversations too much. We're not having anybody come back just yet.
We're gonna have to chuck them out.
Maybe.
Their rooms close anyway, don't they?
Yes. Here we go.
There they come. If you've come back, can you pop along to slide 37, please, and just 37, 38, and 39, and re-rag, because we haven't got much time. So if you've come back, can you re-rag in slides 37, 38, and 39? So if you've just been catapulted from one virtual world to another one, if you can pop to slides 37, 38, and 39, and you can re-rag. And maybe some people now have gone from green to amber or red, and some people will see whether we've had any improvement. But it just doesn't have to go up. It can just be any change, or the same. So if you can,
improvement can be confusion, Jane.
It could, and confusion sometimes is good, because you're starting to be illuminating things, starting to question things. And you might not have time to do it right now, but on slides 40 through to 42, we've also got a repacking activity. So if you'd like to kind of rag, so for a bit of our own assessment, and then if you want to repack on 40 to 42. Di, did you just want to finish off with saying anything from your group? Unfortunately, we don't have time to have feedback from all the groups.
Yeah, so it was really interesting. We talked about, so in my group, we talked about how I'd use the profiles and the excitement when I took them back to the teacher educators and beginning teachers, and that actually they then changed their dialogues to reference the context independent concepts more. And we were talking about the potential of having, given that experience, that then the teacher educators and beginning teachers change their professional identity and have got the potential to unsettle the official knowledge. So that potential for change that's facilitated through LCT.
It's really, really cool. And if anyone's got any questions, if you'd like to put them, I don't know if we've got any questions, let's go back to slide number. Oh, we've got some questions. Di, do you want to have a quick go at one of these questions? So Anna Vera here, just a comment. I just jumped in and already love that I'm learning how to use Google Slides. Haven't done that before, but I'm sure to start doing more of it online. Thanks. Also, Di, showing your different SG profiles at the same time like that is really interesting and useful to understand why people may be talking past each other. Too cool. Does that make?
Yeah, I mean, it was part of my EdD research. I'm not aware of other folk plotting the profiles diffractively, and actually that just became very powerful in the research, that about that change in understanding through dialogue, and if we're talking across or past each other. And a lot of that could have been missed in a single wave, or I could have been claiming that a beginning teacher had grasped a concept that actually they hadn't. So I'm really curious to do more using diffraction.
And we've got two questions from Dan. Dan, we're going to type the answers because now we're going to pass on to the next presenters. So first of all, thank you to everybody for being so good eggs and having a go with Google Slides. And I'm passing back to Steve so that he can introduce the next group. So Steve, over to you.
Excellent, thanks very much. Bang on time. And I love the innovation of the questions being in typed form, and the fact that given that we're now at time, you can still respond to those questions, but at the level and at the leisure of the Google Slides. Like Anna Vera, I think I've learned today how to use Google Slides better than I ever have done before. So this is now us on to session 8, our second of 4 LCT UK sessions, and I'll pass you over to Natalie and Janet to